It's the recap show. It's time for everyone to go to their favorite streaming channel. Saving throw for the recap show. It's time for you to know more about what happened last night. To learn what gave our players a bit of a fright. To indulge in the glorious sight of your handsome host's face. There he is. Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Well, it's a cool jazz installment of Disorganized Play. Hi, I'm your host, Tom Lommel. Welcome. Here we are. So I've got an audition this afternoon, which is why we're a little bit earlier. I've got a drink in my hand, which is very large. And that's the buzz. So we're going to try and keep this to a tight 1 hour. And it's going to be fairly casual. So, as you have questions, we will maybe address them, but we have some Q&A time carved out for us anyhow, right? Yeah, anyway, right. Okay, so, where to begin? I thought last night's session, just to talk briefly about it, I thought it was fun. We did get a little bogged down into... I wish the process of discovering those items was a little cleaner, but and they didn't screw around with the tech tree as much as I expected, but it was also still a lot of screwing around with the tech tree, which was fine. But it's one of those things where exploring something or discovering items, even though it is one of our rewards in our toolbox of DMing, isn't necessarily anything that propels the plot forward, right? It's more like you're giving them tools that they might need down the line. They might need a fire extinguisher. They might need more injections against the god's fire. They might need to treat a disease or something like that. Yes, the Dr. Pepper's. It's the 1 liter. It was on sale for 99 cents. Enjoy. Here's your standard empty. Yeah. Sometimes the 1 liter is the best bargain. I love a bargain. So, it was enjoyable. It was certainly, on rewatching it reinforces the idea that the DM there is there to facilitate play, but is not necessarily there, or can't hold the role as the driver of play. Right? You cannot. It's very difficult as the DM to constantly drive the action of the plot. And oftentimes you find yourself in the position of, how do I present obstacles which actually slow down the development of the plot in a way that will make the players feel like they have satisfactorily, expressed their efforts to gain whatever reward comes out the back end, right? So that's the balance that we need, that we're trying to strike there. So keep that in mind, right? Is that your job as the DM is oftentimes to provide a satisfying challenge, and that is one of your key jobs, and that does get in the way of the plot. I don't know that it necessarily got in the way very much last night. There were some things last night that was like, well, the players want to have fun. They want to have their fanciful fun, kind of like inter-party sniping and little weird quirky role playing and make goofy fart jokes and all that kind of stuff. And that's just something that you have to, or at least I find myself going, well, I'm going to let them indulge in this a little bit. I'm going to be thinking about how the session is going and other things that might be coming up or reactions that might happen while they're doing that. And then at the appropriate time, step in and go, okay, so now this happens, right? You can't constantly be shutting that stuff down, or the players feel like you're sort of, mother henning them a little bit, right? But overall, I thought it was a fine session. They certainly have a lot of tools now of information, but we're going to get into a little bit here, the sticky train of the one true quest. As Dom points out in chat, I did update and alter the tech tree, and make it a Patreon download for backers at the $5 and up level, right? So if you're a Patreon backer, which, it's the first of the month, maybe you just got billed today, great. I made a printer-friendly PDF of it, so it's actually split into two parts, as opposed to what we saw last night on the. Do I have it still in my list of? I don't have it. Oh, maybe I have it in Show and Tell. If I go over to Show and Tell, yeah. So I changed this and I made it into a split tree. So between the 8 and the after the set of double 8s, I added an extra set of arrows so that you could print it off on 2 pages and actually use it at your table as a 2-page handout rather than just a 1-page handout, which I think when it gets kind of that tiny, it's not as interesting. I like having big props on the table. It draws players' attention and gives them, even though it eats up a lot of room on the table, that's fine. It like provides sort of a centerpiece placemat for them to focus their attention on. Let's move some things around. I will get to the point where I have the additional helper roles as a separate page in this thing, and that will probably just be a one sheet. But for now, you've got the basics of it. I did tweak it slightly. I had taken all the DCs down by 2 in this last session because I thought they were too hard. This session I thought they were too easy, even though one of the tier unlocks was they got a bump in their insight tree. I thought it was just way too easy to kind of game the system and get through it, right? So I split the difference and I increased them all by 1. So instead of being as hard as they were, they're slightly easier, but they're not 2 points easier. I may also provide you with a blank version for you to fill in however you want. But none of that stuff is happening today. Anyway, those are some little bonus assets if you're a Patreon backer. I hope you go out and grab them and enjoy them and think about using them in some interesting way in your game. This doesn't necessarily just apply to tech stuff, but that's the main. It could also be just you find weird magic items, right? I will say that I thought the tech synergy result was the most interesting part of walking through the tech tree, because that doesn't have a defined outcome. It is literally like, okay, well, let's improvise what's there and see where this item might actually be able to be hacked into something else, right? Mr. Brian Patterson is with us today, everybody. So thanks I saw you tuned in last night too. So thanks for jumping in live. It's good to see you there. I hope your hand is doing better. So, so that for me as the DM, that was a fun place to improvise. Like they found that fire extinguisher, and then it had some sort of tech synergy, and I'm like, well, what could it possibly be? And like being able to spray this stuff as a mass kind of like healing spray or curing spray or whatever. That seemed to me to be interesting. That's something that just occurred. I was forced to improvise in the moment. And I really think that little extra push thing it's fun. It's interesting. It's a bonus part of the game that you don't have to play, but it creates situations where you kind of have to come up with interesting results. So I like that. I like that. There is a lot of sci-fi weirdness going on. I felt like this session started to fall into let's dispense with all of the window dressing of describing stuff in a fantasy world. And now that they've found a computer who's sort of like fully absorbed their language, including the writing and whatnot, let's just start talking in sci-fi terms. And that is pushing some of the suspension of disbelief that the players have to do a little bit harder than usual. There was a lot of like, I don't understand what that means. I don't know what those words are. What is that thing? Even though the players themselves actually know. So I think we need to find a balance with that. I also think, it's difficult to... We had a little bit of an info dump last night with the orientation, the colonist orientation speech, and I'll get that up for Patreon backers too. And they only caught they only caught 2 pieces of information out of it, even though there was a lot more information packed in, right? And the 2 pieces of information that they got was that the ship is going to take 6 years to get to wherever it's going. And the other thing that they caught was that the info stream is monitored, like everything that is seen through the ocular eye interface thing, all of that traffic is apparently monitored. Now, they haven't connected the fact that since the info stream is down, the computer systems can't do that, right? So whether they realize it or not, they have set themselves on a quest to repair the info stream and then probably reinstate the ability for whatever AIs are lurking in the system or designed to take advantage of the system to then monitor where everybody is. And it's kind of essentially, essentially now the answer to is my eye spying on me? The answer is yes. Yes, the eye is spying on me. So that's interesting. That those were the only two pieces of information that they took away, right? Like the fact that there's 56 decks and there were 7,000 people on board, that didn't really connect with them, right? That they didn't get there with that. It was not. It was reinforced later when Sebastian, the AI, talked to them about that. And that was an interesting moment too, where they went and started talking to Sebastian and like, he can help us get a blue card. Let's do whatever he wants. All right, that's interesting. I don't know. I don't know what the, I have some ideas for what the backstory is there, but they haven't uncovered any of that in any significant way, so that's fine. That can be, that's malleable. That's one of our Schrodinger's clues, is like, who is Sebastian? What is he? What are his motivations? What happened with him? Does his explanation sync up? One of the first things that they latched onto, did you kill Sabina? And he was like, she was taken offline. She wasn't functioning properly. I didn't kill her because computers can't be living or dead. Those are not very direct answers to that question. But they didn't seem interested in pursuing it any further, and I don't know that they had any tools to pursue it any further. So, so overall, a good session. I'm glad that we got to the kind of the cliffhanger reveal of getting back around to Avril's parents, right? So we had some great donations last night that unlocked a lot of interesting things, but I think the best thing plot-wise and also for the structure of the pace of the adventure was to get Avril's folks back involved and make them a priority. And they were really a thread that had been dropped by the party and not really brought about, interested in. And I thought maybe like they would eventually find them when they started encountering the rival gang of veggie pygmies. But to have that kind of moment of high drama where, the mother is literally screaming for them to, get your hands off of him or whatever, I thought that was very compelling and a great place to cut the session and say, all right, we're going to pick this up next time. They also, I struggled with the fact, again, we talked on Tuesday about judging your players' actions subjectively and judging them objectively, right? And so when they decided to split the party and leave in 3 pieces, right? So Thawne stays in the middle, and then Grayson goes off by himself, and the 2 ladies go off by themselves. As a old school D&D player, I'm like, this is the dumbest idea in the world. And objectively, maybe it was a bad idea. Are you in a rush to get this stuff deployed? Why wouldn't you take your time to just go methodically to each different station and deploy the thing? What was the hurry? I think the players are impatient to get on with the God's Fire quest, and so they were just like, let's take care of this in as short amount of time as possible, even though they didn't have any driving motivation or like a countdown clock ticking to get them to do this as fast as possible. They decided to do that on their own. All right, that's fine. So subjectively and objectively, it was a dumb idea, but I didn't want to punish them for that. It was more subjectively a bad idea than it was objectively a bad idea, right? So you gotta, I decided, like, let's let him roll with this a little bit. He goes, it makes a nice, when you have a moment like this where they split the party, right? You can certainly berate your players like, oh, never split the party. That's the dumbest thing you can do in Dungeons and Dragons. That's where they drill it into you from day one. Never split the party. Da, da, da. I don't know that this is necessarily productive or helpful. You know, if you're going to play Adventurers League or play with people at conventions, like strangers at conventions, then it's good to obey those sort of norms. But in a home game, you don't necessarily have to do that. And the opportunity presented in that situation is we can have a very calm, peaceful, methodical, easy deployment for Grayson. He goes down the hall without incident. He lets the things loose. You see the wonder and the kind of the weird fantasy of these mechanical spiders begin like spinning around and correcting things, and then they eventually like open up this aperture and go into the innards of the ship, and then they disappear. And you get to contrast that with Avril and Ava stalking down the hallway, getting to this spot, and then hearing something. And that rapidly turns into that moment of drama, right? So you've got a nice opportunity to kind of do this split screen sort of contrast of this guy's going and he's doing his job and everything's normal, and as far as he knows, everything's fine. And then then the other side of the split screen is everything starts off seeming normal and then it rapidly goes into panic mode. When we would cut back, if we were to cut back to Grayson, I could see him sort of like lifting his head and listening and hearing this screaming and shouting coming from way back in the depths of the ship, and him going, "Oh shit." So I know that it's a standard D&D convention of don't split the party, but having a split scene like that available to you as the DM allows you to do something tonally with the shape of the story that you have to work a little bit harder to pull off if everybody's together, right? Um, and that's not that it can't be effective with the parties all together, but you have to see that opportunity and go, oh, I can do something where I'm doing two very contrasting scenes where one is tranquil and peaceful, and the other one that sort of like sets the ground, the base level tone of like everything's fine, and then that heightens the switch that I pull in the second scene where we hear the panic screams of the mom. So, all right, that's as much as I really want to cover with the recap today, even though that wasn't on our list of topics. I want to talk about the map of clues, and I don't think I can show you my full map of clues because it's got some spoilers on it, and there's some things that I want you to keep, in store for you as a surprise, right? But I was sitting down, I was prepping, and honestly, like, I keep struggling to find different ways to prep this thing and get my mind around what a sandbox type of adventure it is, and give the party strong plot threads to follow and help try and curve and bend the story so that it seems to start picking up momentum, right? And especially when you have a sandbox style adventure, which is basically like wander around until you find the keys and get to the next level. I think that's difficult, right? It's difficult to build a sense of building tension, of building momentum. So I keep kind of fumbling for different things. We talked about Tuesday, we talked about query obstacle reveal, which is one way of analyzing the information in terms of here's the information that the players don't know. We've talked about plot radar, which is just looking at what plot elements and what story elements we have encountered and what ones are still out on the horizon, and whether we can start moving some of these things forward, or if anything move forward or whatnot. That's a second approach that we've talked about. And today what I really want to talk about is I want to talk about what I call the map of clues, right? So let me see if I can maybe just demonstrate that. I don't have, again, I didn't set down my top-down camera today. I mean, yes, it was very fun when Avril tried to convince Thon that he looked good in an eye patch. I thought it was more fun when I said, this is not a persuasion check, it's a performance check. Which seemed reasonable to me, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Um, let me see if I have... My printer ran out of ink, so I have to find one of my old printouts here. I'll be right back. Do I have anything do I have a be right back in my... No, I don't, not in this thing. That's fine. Hi, buddy. It's in here, I think. Let's bring them both. All right. All right. So the other thing that I want to do with this adventure in terms of getting organized with it is I think I need to put all of the map stuff. I need to put all of the handouts into clear sheet protectors because trying to page through folders at the table is really a drag. I was surprised. This is our map. Yeah, that doesn't look bad. I was surprised when they got the map and they did not care about any of the locations on the map. Right? But let's talk about the map of clues. And maybe that's, maybe my prep is one of the things that that shaded my view of that. As I know where all my markers are, they're all back here. Yeah, Havana's always. It's always fun to throw her curveball, right? She is so put out, but not really put out. So, what was that? That was wild. That was wild. Nobody cares. All right, so let's take a look at this thing. So let's take a look at our map, right? So we're going to talk about the map of clues and just one of the ways that I want to organize this thing. This is going to be, I'm going to give you a very crude, recreation of what I went through yesterday, right? So, what I did was I put various locations on the. I just put them on a blank piece of paper, right? So I've got Sebastian. That's a location. I could theoretically put. What else could I put down here? I've got the security office. Where they were. That's where they started. I don't necessarily have to put these things in proximity next to each other. That's not necessarily important. But I want them to be these are essentially encounters, right? These are really a place where something happens, right? So we could put down Tekka Pygmies. And we could put down what else? What else do we have on the map that actually matters? Crew quarters. And the other thing that we could put down is the security station. Yeah, that's what I called it. Now, you could put these things down as you can just you can draw them on this big piece of paper if you want. That's fine. You can put them down as post-it notes and move them around, etc. But I'll take a different color marker here. So what I did is I started listing these locations. And the main exercise that I pursued was I looked at what my various encounters are, and I asked myself, what do the players potentially discover? What is revealed at each of these locations, right? Or what are we going to deal with, right? And then I just started creating stuff. I just started writing stuff down, putting in little bubbles. So the Tekka Pygmies, couple things. They have probably a blue key card. That's worth discovering. They have Avril's parents. that's worth discovering. Snooze that one. Hey, we've got a Windows update for you. Um, what does Sebastian know? Sebastian knows about the info stream. And Sebastian knows some details about the cataclysm. I spelled this wrong. I don't care right now. So, just to give you an idea, like this is what's happening, right? So I'm making a list of the things that are discoverable around each of one of these encounters. Okay. What do I know in the security office? I might know how to repair the power armor. I might know that there's more equipment in the security office, right? But oh, I confuse these things. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Crew quarters. I might be able to get higher security credentials in the crew quarters. I also might get, and here's where we can draw an arrow if we want, I might also be able to get more equipment, right? So I can start kind of like seeing what the importance of these various encounters are, what's discoverable here that's actually interesting, right? Um, so that's what this exercise really helped me do in terms of this security office. I could also had the opportunity to, well, for one thing, it grants access to Sebastian, right? So you kind of have a connection between those things. Like the security office can lead you to Sebastian. There's the orientation video that played at the security office. And some of these things, you know, they could fit in anywhere, right? A big thing that came out of this was a map, but you could almost put the map anywhere and put it free floating, right? But what it did was it allowed me to prioritize which encounters really are going to help me shape the curve or the arc of the plot as the momentum, the pace as we're going along. What things are important? Is it important for them to find a bunch more of equipment? Probably not. Well, then, do I need to worry about sending them to the security station? Because that just does kind of what a bunch of the other places do as well, right? um, and so sometimes more arrows doesn't necessarily mean that's better, right? That's that means this thing is available in a bunch of different places. So now I can kind of just like start to ignore the potential for this encounter. Um, it also shows me where things might be disconnected, right? If Sebastian, if they go visit Sebastian and he asks them to repair the info stream and he tells them about the cataclysm, but I know I want to get to Avril's parents. Well, I realize, okay, these things aren't connected. That means I aren't directly connected. I need to, as the DM, to be able to find a way to connect this thing over to here, which obviously we did in this session, right? But I go, okay, well, I want to get to here. Well, I got to find a connection that'll connect those things. So it allows me to, number one, sort of understand the geography of the map. You know, what I didn't have on here is the public library, which I thought was going to be like, for sure they were going to start pursuing that. But it allows me to look at the geography on the map and then start breaking it down in a way that is not related to how close something is to something else or how dangerous something is compared to something else. Because you could have a really difficult encounter, which I would point out, this security station is a very difficult encounter, right? But it doesn't have a lot of payoff beyond stuff that they've already explored. They've already got equipment. Maybe they could repair the power armor. That's great, but it's not essential to what's going on in to developing our plot. It just gives them another tool. So I don't know what else I was gonna say about that. Oh yeah. So the amount of danger associated with an encounter isn't necessarily important to its relevance to the plot. They're not necessarily connected, right? So this allows me, much like Plot Radar, to take a look at, like, okay, where are the clues on the board, and where can I help guide the party into areas where they might discover more about what's going on, as opposed to kind of aimlessly wandering through the adventure and just hopefully they'll strike upon the combination of clues that will lead them into some sort of insight, right? And there's two dangers there. Number one, their wandering at random may not take them, they may not gather facts in a way, or gather evidence in a way that gets them, that makes them draw appropriate conclusions about what's going on, right? There's a lot of times where players or the party will collect clues in a mystery and combine them in such a way that their conclusion is completely different from what's going on. And so, especially in a sandbox style adventure, when you're working on that, you're working that angle, you can't count on them going, oh, okay, well, because of this and this and this, therefore, it turns out that the Mummy King is actually the big bandit behind everything. We need to go to his tomb, and he must have been released or something like that, right? But that that's problematic. The other thing too, so they just may not assemble the clues in an order that leads them to what the actual, to the relevant conclusion behind what's going on. But number two, they might start focusing on clues on their own that are not relevant to the working premise or the underlying premise. The players are notorious for generating a hypothesis and then relentlessly pursuing it until they're often violently proven wrong. So, I have to sneeze. Excuse me. So this kind of this methodology does not helps you pick a path through the events or through the encounters that may help sharpen and bring focus to their understanding of what's going on, or give them motivation and help them motivation toward their goal, refocus their goal, and give them some strategic edge in how they decide to execute against that goal, right? And those are all things that we talked about in some way, shape, or form on Tuesday, or at least tangentially, right? So that's something that helped me with this big sandbox level, especially. That's something that helped me get my mind around, okay, what if they go here? What's revealed here? And it does definitely give you tools for analysis to go, what's the point of this encounter? What are they going to learn from this encounter? And if there's nothing attached to that thing, then you need to ask yourself, well, what is the function of this thing? Why will the players enjoy this? Because if they don't come out the other side of the encounter with more knowledge, then what is it that they receive on the other side? Some encounters are admittedly just there to wear down resources, but I would argue those should be few and far between, because you can't develop character and develop plot strictly by monsters attacking, right? That's just a grind, and it's far easier to say a poison gas is released, give me a DC 20 Constitution save. Okay, most of you take 2 levels of exhaustion or something like that. Like, if you want to grind down the party, it's a world of high magic. You can find a way to do that, either through a gauntlet of traps or a monster that hits really hard and then can't doesn't have follow-up attacks that hit as hard, etc. Maybe it has a power that is really big on round one, but then it has a recharge and it just never it recharges on a 1 in 6. It's probably not going to happen, right? Point being that if an encounter on your graph doesn't have one of these information reveal boxes attached to it, or it has a bunch of boxes that are also attached to other encounters, think about whether this encounter is actually all that interesting or useful, right? And the beautiful part about that is, if they decide to go there of their own volition or somehow stumble upon it, you're prepared to deal with what happens. And if they don't decide to go there, that's fine. It's covered by something else. But if the box is empty, then you have to put some time in and go, well, wait a minute. All right, these veggie pygmies in here, according to the adventure, they don't have any function. They just live there and they just attack stuff. What information is revealed? Now I have to do some actual DMing work and go, well, why would those? What is their function? What would they do? What could the party learn either from interacting with the veggie pygmies or defeating the veggie pygmies? Potentially avoiding the veggie pygmies, right? But I think that's where your DM prep gets you into trouble. If your lack of DM prep is when they go into an encounter that doesn't seem to have any focus or purpose or any information, new information attached to the outcome of it. That's where you end up just sort of spinning your wheels in combat, or whatever the case may be, and then the players get to the end of it and they go, why do I care? All right. So that's the map of clues. That took a little more time than I expected, but I think that may be an interesting way for you to. It's a combination approach, right? So plot radar and query obstacle reveal are two ways of analyzing what's facing your players, completely divorced from the geography of the adventure, right? And obviously, just reading the module, assuming that it's laid out in a geographic fashion, of looking at the map and matching the encounter keys and all that kind of stuff, that's a very geographically tight way. That's very wedded to pursuing a mental path through the dungeon when you're prepping, right? This map of clues is my attempt to sort of blend those two things so that I have, number one, a very good, I start developing an idea of what the information is that's revealed behind each encounter, and really what helps me decide what its purpose is. But then number two, I do also have an idea of oh, these two things are really close together. They could send to someone, the security office is very close to Sebastian. It wouldn't be that hard to get them to that spot. Conversely, if I say, oh, okay, well, the Tekka pygmies are way far away from where they are right now, now I have to, let's put some thought into what could I do that could send them so far away from where they're currently exploring, right? So this is really sort of a blend, a hybrid approach of the geographic understanding that's traditionally presented in a D&D module and the type of plot relevant and story development type of analysis that we're trying to do, and shaping the arc of our adventure with our other tools, right? So hopefully that gives you some ideas how you may use that in your own game. I do want to talk about this next thing, the sticky train track of the One True Quest, and we sort of touched on it earlier. It certainly come up here in chat here earlier, but they are, I don't remember even who, yeah, Modern Chow said the party is so focused on the key cards and getting to hell, they don't even care about the loot. And that's the heart of what's going on here. Is I gave them a map, I gave them an orientation video, they had an NPC to interact with, they've got all of these different weird technology tools. None of them was a blue key card. I swear to God, if they had found a blue key card and in the very first box in the storeroom, they would have been like, we leave the storeroom. We don't care about any of the other stuff in here. We'd take this blue key. They don't know where to take it They just need to know that they have it. So their understanding of the plot is very singular. And I think that's dangerous, but I think that's something that, as the DM now, I need to head off and find a way to help streamline how their decision to pursue this thing so doggedly does actually end up paying off in some way, shape, or form, right? I don't want to punish them for being so focused on the blue key card. I want to get them the blue key card and send them to engineering. This encounter with Avril's parents is probably going to have to like take that into account. How can we explore the stakes of what's going on with them being captured and, you know, apparently something dire about to happen to them? How can we deal with that and still convey information that gets them a blue key card and gets them down into engineering where they can wrestle with the God's Fire situation? So there are times where no matter what sort of goodies you there are times where no matter what sort of goodies you sort of chow out there, that's just the way it is, right? That's something that that you have to cope with. That they're going to keep following whatever drumbeat that they've been listening to, and they're going to go down that dark tunnel even though there's no light, and there's all of these other side passages that you think seem so interesting. Nope, they're going to follow that one true quest. And I think that most parties, you have a limited amount of time to play, right? And so they want to get to the heart of the action as quickly as possible, right? In as straightforward a manner as possible, right? And that means that they want things to be simple. So when somebody says, guys, our quest is to find a blue key card, let's go find it. Everybody else is not going to, is unlikely to sit there and fight about it and go, well, I don't think, you know, what about this? They don't want to, debating what to do next is one of the most tedious pieces of Dungeons and Dragons. Whether you're debating it from a character motivation point of view, oh, my character wouldn't do this, I don't know why I would go on this quest. Or you're just debating it from sort of like a factual point of view in terms of, well, we know this and we know you very rarely have all of the information you need to make a truly informed and intelligent decision about what the best path forward is. So you're always working with incomplete information and kind of like a nebulous context. So sitting around and debating about like what seems like the smart thing to do next is in some respects a fool's errand, no matter how you approach it, right? So players will glom onto something and start, you know, use that as their goal and kind of ignore everything else. And I think that's partly what's going on here, right? Is like we sit down every week and we, you know, don't spend I spend a lot of time thinking about the game, but I don't think the players necessarily do, or certainly they don't spend a lot of time coordinating with each other. Like, okay, well, what do you think's going on, and what do you think we should do next? Like, they're not there, and it's more of a casual kind of experience for them, and that's fine. But then it should not be a big surprise when they go, oh well, let's find that card. That's what we've got to do. Let's stick with that. It's the whole Occam's razor, right? To adventuring, which is it just cuts clean, get to the heart of it. Even though it seems like maybe there's a bunch of other stuff going on, let's just follow this one thing to a resolution, and once it's resolved, maybe we'll have a better idea of our path forward, right? So, that's what I want to say about that. Basically, is that the players tend to trust either a conclusion that they have reached about how to proceed once it's settled, like they don't want to relitigate it, or they will trust whatever hook is presented to them by the GM because they don't feel like they have the agency to go around and explore a bunch of different hooks, and they don't want to waste the GM's time by dragging him into territory where he hasn't planned on X, Y, and Z. You know, they will sometimes go off on a wild goose chase, but I've seen players say, well, it seems like we're supposed to go into this goblin dungeon, so let's do it. Let's go see what these goblins are up to. Um, so it's a situation that you have to mitigate a little bit or contend with, that the players aren't trying to puzzle out every single opportunity or the deepest, most twisted knot of the mystery and try and pursue that. They're trying to take advantage of what the most straightforward course of action is, so that they can actually get to the business of doing something instead of the business of sitting around talking about doing something. D20 Monkey says, do you feel like fatigue has settled in and the PCs just want to rush the end and get out of the ship? Maybe. Maybe. Um, that's the question you always have to ask yourself, is like, are they... So here's what I think. I think they're tired of not knowing what's going on, of not understand, of being lost in this literally like alien world, right? And everything's so strange, and they don't have any tools to cope with their environment. They're at the mercy of not knowing the language, not understanding the technology, not being able to manipulate, anything. Everything is very hostile and foreign, and they don't have a lot of leverage over it. So they don't have that. They don't have strong tools available to them. We're giving them those tools. I think I recognized this like last week and started taking steps to give them the tools to take care of it. Like they got a map, but maybe it's too late now for them to care about the map. And they've been talking to some NPCs who've been shedding light on what's going on, but it doesn't help them solve the thing of like, let's get the God's Fire and get out. Um, I also I would like to like probably get to the God's Fire in like the next 2 sessions. I don't know if we could do it next session. That would be tricky, but I would like to get them at least to the brink of engineering in the next session or two, because there's more to the story than just getting the God's Fire. If it was that simple, the whole plot is a little disappointing, right? So I don't know about if it's necessarily fatigue. I'm sure there's a certain amount of player frustration there in terms of we're stuck in this giant maze. We don't know where to go or what to do next. Let's just find this thing because that's the one thing we know, and that's what we're going to pursue. So, so that's that. A lot of commentary here on that. Yeah, they're definitely, they've glommed onto like one thread, which is we need this blue key to get to the God's Fire. Estelle Castillo points out that the specific carries a lot of weight over the general. The moment you give details on something, even something unimportant, the players will latch onto it. And we saw that last night, right? We give them this whole speech, like the colony orientation, welcome, blah, blah, blah. And they glommed on to the very specific thing of having an eye implant means that your actions are being monitored, and that was like red alert, like big flag, da, da, da. Like if we were to do plot radar today, like that would be on the board as a huge element, is the players feel like they're being monitored. And obviously it was hugely important for Avril's character, like she didn't like that, but that that was unanticipated, but it was a piece of specific detail that I included as sort of this fun, like, it's got almost kind of a paranoia style bent to it of like trust the computer citizen and whatnot and report your fellow citizens if things are going wrong. And I thought maybe the theme going on here of there's something inherently dangerous about warp travel would come to light more than it did. And maybe it was just implicit more than it was explicit, and the surveillance aspect was very explicit, and so that's what got highlighted. But Estelle Castillo points out. Like, that was what they latched onto, that one specific thing, and all the other information went out the window. Um, so, Blind Seer says, I got to thinking about the emotional dynamics. Your games are always fun and lighthearted, which makes them fun for the players and fun to watch. Sometimes with the right players, I like to introduce elements of tension and even in fear, a little classic horror. It can draw players into the story. Do you ever do that? I think this game is definitely, we've talked behind the scenes amongst ourselves about like what is the tone of this show, like what is it, and I think it is very much like Tom tries to keep it together while the players do wacky hijinks and wreak havoc with whatever plans have been laid before them, and and that has a very approachable and relevant kind of like, oh yeah, it's just like my home game. So I think in those respects there's a certain kind of like approachability to it in terms of, oh yeah, I've played at that table. I had somebody who went off in just that way, and we ended up going off in this whole wild goose chase, etc. Right? And that being said, I think there are moments of genuine drama and genuine kind of like heartfelt relatability and connection between the PCs. We maybe saw it a little more with Amy's arc in the first season of the show, because her character like went down sort of this dark rabbit hole of like, I'm in contact with these powers and my family's connected with this weird vampire tree, and we're part of this vast sort of like nationwide conspiracy to somehow poison the minds of these children. And there were a lot of horror elements there that were then also then offset by some of these goofy role-playing moments, right? Or some of the hijinks that happen at the table. So I don't want to grind a real heavy kind of like serious horror game or high tension. I especially don't like to pit the players against each other. And with the tack arc that we had earlier, I felt like that was a real danger. If you go back and watch Disorganized play, we see stuff in there that is like the players don't trust one another, and it even comes back, as Blind Seer, thanks for the donation, appreciate it. Um, it comes back with Black Razor too, where the party stops trusting Thawne, and those can be compelling things to introduce, and it's very easy for the DM to like, oh, I'm going to give this player kind of like this little taste of dark power and see where it leads them, and if it tempts them at all, da, da, da. And it can be very easy for a player to go, oh yeah, this seems like a really cool threat, but the next thing you know, you find out that it's that player versus the other 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is, and now all of a sudden you've got this weird dynamic of, well, we're all friends and we're playing this game together, and I don't want to have to kill your character because that seems like I'm killing your fun, but my character doesn't have a reason to trust your character and might actually attack their character within the fiction of the game, and it creates this real dissonance. So it's an easy element to introduce as a DM of, I'm going to make one player kind of like the traitor of the group and the rogue element, but I think it's a very dangerous situation to navigate, and I think you have to be very careful with that. Um, I think Thawne's dad has some stuff to um, explore in terms of emotional weight. I feel like his element has dropped so far off the radar that it's going to be tough to bring him back around in a way that really has some serious gravitas to it. Although maybe we will get to that moment with Thawne. I don't know. That's It feels like if I hadn't been trying to like push them so hard to get to the Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, we might have had, like, if we dropped one more session in there and made it 4 instead of 3 in that interlude, then after the end of the Waterdeep stuff, we might have had a session where Thawne got to like kind of cure and release his dad and see what happened with that scene. But instead, he sort of like decided to like put that on the back burner and keep pushing on the main quest. And I think that was more of a player decision than it was an in-character decision. Um, I'm not sure, D20 Monkey, if the parents are going to travel with the group, hang back. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. The party already has a lot of followers. They have Ronald P.P. Dusty Bones, they have Klaus, they have the potential to kind of create a lot of hangers on. And honestly, I have a hard time squaring that in my mind as the DM in terms of like, well, wait a minute, it's not just the four of you. There's seven of you, and one of you is just this skeleton who barely takes direction, and one of you is a robot that probably weighs 800 pounds and all that kind of stuff, right? So, so I'm not a huge fan. I just personally struggle with the idea of we have this. It's the party and then this enormous entourage supporting them. I always find that a stretch of my suspension of disbelief that nine people could go through the dungeon quietly, or stealthily. It just You've been in a group of six of your friends. Like how much noise you make just going down the hallway, right? Um, so, all right, that's the deal. Estelle Castillo says, party conflicts make better entertainment for the viewers than it does for the players. I mean, I think the players have fun playing out those party conflicts too, right? I mean, that's something that you have to keep in mind is unless it gets really pitched, like they enjoy like needling and pressing each other and asking each other, pointed questions and complaining about what one or the other is doing and whatnot. So I don't think um, they don't necessarily hate it. It's not. It's when it comes to a real like point of conflict that it gets a little dicey. But this group also trusts each other and like they can handle it. My issue with it is really that it tends to recenter the plot around what does the DM have prepared for the party to explore and the storyline that they want to follow, and it puts a lot of the onus on, are we going to follow the storyline or are we going to deal with this weirdo in our party who's decided to do all this dark, evil stuff that we just do not approve of? And so the storyline starts to circle back and it starts to become sort of this nebulous kind of death spiral of you just dance back and forth between, do we attack one of our fellow party members and do something drastic with them, or do we try to find a way to justify our character's tolerance for the offenses that they have so grievously committed and keep following the storyline that has actually been laid out before us to pursue. DJ Regular says, how do you handle after session feedback from your players for the show? Is it an after session sort of thing, or do you wait a few before you ask? Um, so with this particular game, we wrap it, and by the time we're all done, turn the cameras and the lights off and stuff like that, it's 11:30, and everybody's kind of like ready to like get away from the table and get away from the game, and we talk about. I'm always curious, like, okay, well, I'm not watching chat. What did chat have to say? What were the highlights from there, and what were our numbers, and how did we do on our tier donations and whatnot? It's some of the more nuts and bolts stuff that aren't really relevant to running a regular D&D game. So I don't have regular check-ins with the players. I will kind of like pitch things at them in our Slack channel and ask them questions there. But we don't have a regular sit down. We have had them. I know it came up, I think, last month or so. And I will say, like, the most useful outcome of that discussion was it started on Slack and it kind of went back and forth and back and forth. And then we just sat down. We said, okay, well, we're going to meet at 7 this week instead of 7:30. And we're going to sit down for half an hour and talk about the game and where we think we are and what's going on and, how we would like to change our characters or whatever, or the dynamic that's at play. And what do you think? And having that face-to-face time was definitely valuable. It was a lot more concise and it was a lot clearer than bouncing stuff back and forth in Slack. The problem with email or Slack is that if you have 5 people involved in the conversation, you generally have 2 people who are actively involved in it, and then 2 people who will check in with it at the end of the day, and 1 person who may or may not check in it at all. And that's like a generalization. I'm not specifically labeling anybody in our group that with those particular tags. That's just like by virtue of the fact that some of us work from home and we're on the computer all day, or we're out of the office and we're on the computer all day, and some people have jobs where they're not actually in front of the screen all the time and whatnot. So that sort of asynchronous communication actually, I think, is not a benefit to sorting out these types of kind of post session, like, well, where are we at with the game? Like, this, to me, I interpret this as a bigger question of like, are we enjoying the game? Where are we at with the game? What do we want to do? So yeah, I don't have a post session, kind of like recovery, like recap kind of thing with the players. And it only comes up when we feel the need, when we feel the need for it to come up. So, that's that. That's that. So, I'll take 1 or 2 questions. I don't want to go too much over in terms of the stream because I do have to change clothes and get in the car and head over to Hollywood, which it's Oscars week, so everything is going to be a disaster. So, but if you do have something that you want to discuss, go ahead and I'll take 1, maybe 2 questions here. So pitch something at me in terms of stuff that's happening in your own home game that you're struggling with, or you have a question about, or whatever. Because I think that covers most of where we're at in terms of. We'll talk more on Tuesday about how to prepare with Avril's parents and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm going to indulge my enormous thirst for delicious Diet Dr. Pepper. It's got a lot of fizz. I talked it up and then it was not that good. So, yeah, if you have something that you want to fire off, let me know. I will say, just by way of speaking of day jobs and whatnot, that the Evil Hat has a Kickstarter going on for Fate dice, new dice, and also some Fate points, little Fate tokens that I think you could use in your game. And it's the last day of that campaign, so if you are so inclined to get another set of dice, or a 3-pack of dice, or I believe the Fate points come in like a 30-pack. Those are $12. Check it out. Check that out over on the you can follow the Evil Hat official Twitter feed, and you'll be able to see plenty of links there. So, Blind Seer says, I was thinking about what you said last time about not punishing players, and I agree with that. I was wondering if it was related to Vanna's story about the bad DM who punished the party for her doing something unusual. When those things happen, it's usually fun, though. I think it's important as a DM to not be bothered by what the players do. The only time I get annoyed with players is if they're making it harder for the other players to have fun. Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think you should not intervene with. I think you should intervene if one player is trying to make it more difficult for the rest of the players to enjoy the game, no matter what that is. Like, if there's something sexist going on or whatever, like, it's your imperative as the person who's facilitating the game to time out and go, well, this seems like it's problematic. Is there a different way that we can do this? Different way we can put this? Is everybody okay with this? Etc. Right? So that's one thing for sure. I mostly meant like I will find myself punishing the players for. Here's an example. So if I think it's if I tell them, okay, there is a rope bridge going across a chasm, and it doesn't look very sturdy, but it does go in a straight line from side to side, or there is a pathway that goes down, but you see that there's a cave nearby or whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to think of the alternative thing of this. So there's a rope bridge, or there is a set of there's a frozen ice bridge that looks like it's very fragile, right? Actually, this whole scenario is a little too ambiguous. I want to think of an example more clear cut. I don't know. The point being that when the players come upon a circumstance and they decide to do something that I personally think is dumb, why would you want to cross this rope bridge when you can use the magical levitation, like the levitating platform that just ferries people back and forth? Then that subjective judgment, right? That moment of irritation where I go, this is dumb. Why are you doing this? Sometimes leads me to punish the players by making the DC harder than it is, or calling for more checks than it necessarily is, or whatever, right? So that's where I find myself, like I think that's a self-criticism of, look, if they want to somehow navigate the goofy rope bridge because they feel like the levitating ferry platform is somehow untrustworthy, from the player's point of view, they may have completely justified that in their mind as to why one is better than the other. And the fact that I have more information about it is influencing my view, but also just that moment of irritation means, oh, okay, I'm going to ramp this up and I'm going to punish them. I'm going to make it harder for them to do this because they've chosen to do this the dumb way or the hard way, right? And I don't think that's appropriate DMing, right? I've caught myself doing it. So definitely one of those, like, I'm guilty, right? But it was a moment, where I went, oh, well, this is me being irritated with the player and not being a arbiter of the game, right? And I shouldn't let that judgment bleed over into my duties as an arbiter of the game. Because if I have these two options that honestly kind of get to the same outcome, then if the player wants to scramble across the rickety rope bridge, why make those checks why do they have to be tougher than maybe what's outlined in the book? Or why do I decide on a number that's harder than just standing on top of the, that's difficult or whatever, right? So something that's what I really meant by punishing the players for something that you think is dumb. And it's a behavior that I have indulged in, and I would expect there's a lot of DMs who have also executed that move and not realized that that's what their motivation is. Oh, okay. Well, if you're going to do something stupid, then I'm going to make you pay for it. There are certainly moments where the players maybe know they're doing something stupid and everybody is expecting something bad to happen. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go up to the big pit of tar and I'm going to, see if I can, just light the edge of it on fire or whatever. Um, so there are times where the players know that they're playing with fire, right? And they expect a big punishment or payoff. Oh, okay. There's a skull dangling from a rope, and it's got runes inscribed at the head. Okay. Well, guess what? I'm going to try and pluck the gem out of the eye of the skull. The expectation in there is this is an inherently risky behavior, and anything bad that happens is deserved, right? Whereas in the example that I gave, deciding to cross the rope bridge versus using the levitating platform, not necessarily that much more risky, and there's not a big moment of drama there. So, and honestly, the outcome is just to get from point A, literally get from point A to point B. So, do it. Just let them do it. So it's one of those things where I've noticed that my subjective response to the way that somebody has chosen to play, when it doesn't mesh with my playstyle, I can get I start to get resistance. I rebel against it. So that's something that I think you should be on the lookout for, right? Something that you should take note of. Do you do this in your own game? Is it something is it a trap that you fall into? And is it necessary? Does it fulfill function of the story? Or are you trying to just punish the player for not playing the way that you wanted them to play? Mm, 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 mm. As Estelle Castillo points out, why slog down the narrative over something trivial? Just keep the game going. If you want to see me play, you can watch me in the first season of Barky's Brigade and in several of our other marathon one-offs, as Dom has pointed out in the chat. So you can catch me there. And also, I was part of the Wizards of the Coast Extra Life stream at from Gamehole Con, and Garav was also in that game too, and Garav was hilarious, and I had a lot of fun. But it was a great, it was and it was interesting. Patrick Rothfuss is in that game, and Aaron Evans, and Ed Greenwood, and John Kovalik, and Chris Perkins was the DM, and we had a great time. It went long. We didn't know it was gonna be like a 4.5 hour game, but it was fun. So. um, I did find that things slowed down flipping back and forth through the books, and what I may do is print off like the tech. I might print off the tech appendix as its own thing. Um, I don't know. I said earlier in the stream that I'm thinking about getting sheet protectors to start dividing stuff up so that I can literally kind of like flip it out, pop it out, take it, that sort of stuff. Um, Yeah, I love that book in terms of it's a great scan and update and refresh of the presentation of the adventure. The adventure itself is so old school that it has some real problems with presentation to begin with that are just sort of endemic to the way that it's laid out. Um, but it doesn't help that there's 3 other adventures in that book, right? So I wish that I had the clean, sleek version of the adventure that's in the hardcover book that I've got, but without the other 3 adventures. I don't care about Tomb of Horrors or Lost Caverns of Canth right now. Um, if I was a real jerk, I'd just slice the binding and and maybe put it in sheet protectors or something. But yeah. All right, so that brings us to our time, everybody. Yes, long live Udo Meinhardt. This is certainly a fun character. So tonight is the penultimate episode of Never Tell Me the Odds. You can join America's GM, DJ David Crennan, tonight for that. Tomorrow night is, of course, another installment of Wild Cards, featuring our very own Dom Zook here in the chat, as well as Garav and Megan and Jordan Caves Callerman at the wheel, and Jordan Pridgeon as well. On Sunday, we've got Army of Darkness Part 3 with special guests Heather Wood and Nick Gelman in Tempting Fate game on Sunday at 5. So, yeah, sorry I started a little bit early, but I've got an audition I've got to get to, and I got to change clothes and have a little food before I do that. But yeah, I got to leave here in the next 15 minutes, so we had to push things up. So, great discussion today. I think we had it was an interesting session last night, but it's always like I didn't expect this adventure to be as much of a challenge in terms of it being a sandbox adventure, right? I guess I didn't reckon with the fact that it was much more of a sandbox than I actually thought it was, and so that's required a lot of kind of on the fly adjustment, and you chum some stuff out into the waters of the party and you see what they bite on, and sometimes they don't bite on the things that you expect, but that's all good. That's all good. So great talk today. I will be back Tuesday. Hopefully Tuesday we'll be at our regular time, and maybe we'll be back in the studio at 2 o'clock. I can't vouch for anything. I'm on a veil for some things, and my schedule is surprisingly busy for it just being March 1st here. So normally February things are kind of dead, but maybe it's possible that on the commercial front things are winding up to do a push for March Madness, and like, let's get a bunch of March Madness commercials. That sort of stuff certainly does happen in this business, where it's like March Madness is a big sporting event, the start of NASCAR and baseball is a big like push for commercial stuff, and then there's a moment in the summer where there's kind of nothing going on, and then long about July we start the Christmas ads and also football and whatnot. It's a weird thing. Yeah, some of those same issues we had with the mystery in terms of that being a little bit of a sandbox too, right? Although that had a more defined plot than Expedition of the Barrier Peaks does. So Thank you so much for joining me. Thanks to Farquaad and BSB Care and all of our mods. DJ Regular, of course, is doing a yeoman's work putting clips together. Thank you so much for that. Thanks to Dom, who keeps the channel running. And thanks to Blind Seer for the donation today. Really appreciate that. I'll have to try and figure out a way to make that into an appropriate, make that be appropriately reflected in our Iron Keep game. We'll see. So that's the buzz. Thank you so much for joining us. Spread the word on social media. If you haven't backed the Patreon, now's a great time to do that. And until next time, let's dungeon. Bam! I am 56 decks for 56 decks. That's 7,000 lost souls on the great colony ship Valerius. Top that, Dom Zook.